Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Tuesday, April the 15th, 2025, and today we're talking about a plant it and forget it farm business model, harvesting from cover crops, and what we're up to right now on our farm. So let's do it. All right, well, welcome to Tuesday, everyone. I hope everyone's week is off to a reasonable start. I am trying to ease into the work week so as not to overdo it again, and mostly succeeding. The weather was very nice yesterday, however, but the next couple days will be a little colder, so hopefully that'll slow me down. So every couple weeks, I like to fill you in on what is going on the ground here in Kentucky on my farm. First, speaking of the ground is beginning to erupt. Flowers are blooming, grass is growing, like it greened up fast here. And with all the warmth and moisture, it's more so than usual. Stuff is just growing like mad. Weeds, lettuce, carrots, anxiety about being behind, all of it. On the production side of things, I started squash and zucchini this past week. I was honestly probably a week or so behind on that, but when I normally start them, but I had forgotten to order soil mix because I am awesome at this job. I start those in wind strips and will transplant them in the field in about 10 days or so under row cover because we're not past our last frost date. And in fact, had 2 hard frosts this past weekend, so that was fun. Hello, redbud winter. I started some broomcorn and some red sorghum, not for any real reason, except that I love the way those plants look, and my birds love them. Specifically, the red-winged blackbirds seem to really get down with those. My littlest helped me with some seeding of those, which was fun. Always love to work with them. For a while, I can get away with starting lettuce every 2 weeks or 3 weeks because I get a second cutting from those beds, but heading into May and June, I will start lettuce every week beginning this month, basically next week, because once it heats up, assuming we have another warm May and June like we've been having, I really only get one good reliable cutting from those beds. Sometimes I get like a partial second cutting, but it's usually never quite the same quality or same amount. So May is when things really start to pick up here because I am harvesting, planting, and starting crops basically all day, every day. And that, of course, is good. Those are all things that add value to the farm. The majority of your work as a farm business should be adding value, not on weeding or mowing or whatever takes your time and doesn't bring in any sort of revenue or grow anything. That's how we stay afloat, focusing on value, but also how we make some time for ourselves to watch birds and bugs. I'm also going to try my hand at the cucumber grafting this week, maybe today, in fact, since it's a little bit cooler, which I should say I'm a bit nervous about. I got to be honest. It's just a hair more technical than tomato grafting, where a few more things can go wrong. Of course, cucumbers seemingly have very little will to live in general, so that's always a small challenge no matter what you're doing with cucumbers. Grafting, it's kind of taking it up a notch. The other thing that will go down in the next week or so is getting the grafted tomatoes into the ground. Now that they are at a decent size, or at least a size I like them, 6 to 12 inches tall. And now that the grafts are fully healed, it's about that time. I do typically want to get tomatoes in the tunnel that first or second week of April, but where grafting has set me back a couple weeks on the seedling production because it takes about 7 to 10 days for them to fully heal and really start to grow again, I would have to start them a couple weeks earlier than I usually do, which is just kind of a pain given my current setup to be able to keep them warm enough in mid-January. Plus, where we're not at the farmer's market anymore, that need to be the absolute first to market isn't quite there, really. It's still important to some extent, almost no matter where you're selling, to be early, but considerably less so if you're selling retail than if you're selling at a farmer's market, where people are ecstatic to see those first tomatoes, but maybe a little bit less so ecstatic to see, the third or fourth tomatoes to come in. The garlic is looking awesome as always. Music, it just rules the world. The potatoes have thankfully just started to pop through, and I have to be honest, after that historic rainfall we had last week and the weekend before, I was sweating just a little bit that they were all going to rot. We'll see. So far, so good. I also planted a row of romaine lettuce down the middle of those potato beds. That was a bit of a whim, and I regretted it almost immediately because it's going to mess with my trials. But also, those beds looked empty, so I blame my brain. This is going to be a big month for getting greens going and starting to harvest them. It's definitely a big transition time in general in April, going from getting the place ready to plant to planting and harvesting and planting and harvesting. And no doubt my Merlin app is going to be busy. For real though, download your Merlin app for the birds. It's the best. All right, I think that's kind of most of what I have going on right now. What about you all? Ground still frozen? Harvesting out of the fields? out of your tunnels. Check in and let us know where you are. Otherwise, we'll take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll try a different take on harvesting from cover crops. BRB.
Oh, I ain't gonna live like this no more. Most of my life's been waging war till I found peace. I could have swore what she did shook me to.
Today's episode is brought to you by FarmRaise. Still using QuickBooks for your farm's bookkeeping? You're wasting time and losing money. Farm finances can be overwhelming, but they don't have to be. FarmRaise Tracks is the all-in-one tool built just for farmers. Manage expenses, prep for taxes, run payroll, and plan for the future without spreadsheets or stress. Just clear, organized insights to keep your operation thriving. Thousands of farmers trust Tracks to make smart financial decisions all year long. It's time you did too. Use code NOTIL20, that's all caps, no spaces, NOTIL20 for 20% off the life of your membership at farmraise.com. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener, are enjoying this content, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes from Patreon member Emily McDonald, who writes, quote, I would love a segment on leaving cover crops long enough to actually get a harvest out of them. I'm a backyard gardener on a 0.6 acre lot with a full-time job and have portions of the lawn I'm trying to convert to garden space, so have been using a lot of cover crops to help achieve this. I'm in Northeast Ohio, and these areas do tend to hold onto a lot of water, at times of a lot of precipitation too. For context, I typically don't plan on using all of this space currently in 1 year, but am using the cover crops to continue to enrich the soil until I intend to convert it to actual growing space. However, my question is, are there certain cover crops that are better to use to leave for harvest and are worth the harvesting, even if it's just a matter of saving the seeds for next year's cover so I don't have to keep buying them? I know that some crops, such as legumes, have the nitrogen fixing benefits if you terminate them before they go to seed. So if there are some I will let go to seed to harvest, will I get the same benefits from the crop? My goal right now is just to get the soil broken up by the roots and add organic matter, but any additional benefits would be great. Just wondering if you've had any experience letting cover crops go in certain areas and use them as actual crops, or if there are other crops typically used for harvesting that can also be used as cover crops. I do have groundhog radish as one on my list, but also want to keep in mind rotating for additional nutrient benefits. End quote. All right, thanks, Emily. Great question. So I did an episode in December about making money from cover crops that I will link in the show notes, and it talks mostly about flowers and cover crops that you could harvest. However, I love it when I get similar questions because it allows me the opportunity to try it from a different angle. In this case, the seeds, but also perhaps a few other perspectives. So Patreon members never hesitate to ask just whatever question you have out of fear of me having answered it before. I'm always game to give it another crack. So indeed, I did not talk about letting cover crops go to seed in that episode. When a cover crop such as a grain, rye, wheat, etc., or a legume goes to seed, you do indeed lose a lot of the soil health benefits of the plant. It effectively, uses many of the nutrients that you wanted to gather in the production of its progeny, right? Its seed. However, it still leaves some carbon and nutrients behind, as well as any work it did to decompact the soil. In other words, it's not a total loss, and it may help you with your water issues. There will always be some benefit to having living roots in the soil, even if the plants senesce. Now, as for physically harvesting seeds out of a cover crop, well, that can be a little trickier, as the goal of most plants is to scatter their seeds, like that's what they're trying to do, so keeping them contained can be challenging. So being able to get the entire crop out without replanting the cover crop in the process will be a little bit of a challenge. And you may want to harvest just before the seeds begin to fall, which can be a challenge depending on the crop and may reduce some of the viability of those seeds. On a larger scale, obviously, you have things like a combine that does this job fairly cleanly. On a hand scale, it will require some ingenuity, perhaps take a large tote out to the field and cut the stalks into the tote to process them. just hang them over the tote so that they don't fall on the ground. That way you can ensure the majority of the seed falls into the container and not into your soil. I do not recommend just allowing the seeds to drop and replant them, only because it will germinate really soon thereafter, depending on what it is and where you are. Because sometimes that's an idea people have, that I'll just grow the cover crop and then I'll just let it reseed while something else grows. But that stuff can often grow way too fast, and it can get things a little complicated and difficult. Now, most commercial growers are not going to do this, and not because they don't have any interest in saving seed. Honestly, most commercial growers I know would be totally down to save seed if it made sense in their context. And in fact, in Dan Briesbrau's book, The Seed Farmer, he actually talks about the sort of challenge of saving seeds in a market garden context. So check that out, and you can get it from us to help support our work. So that's awesome. But mostly for market growers, it's because of the risks, and because many would prefer the healthy benefits of the cover crop, and also because the amount of time they'd have to be in the ground to fully mature to seed would be a long time, and that would take up a lot of garden space. In your context, since you're not in a rush to grow it, though, that makes sense to me. Market growers might also say the labor in processing the seed would be no small task, because that can be a big task, especially without the processing tools. I mean, the amount of time it would take to process enough seed for it to be worth it, especially without, like I said, the seed cleaning equipment, it's a little bit harder to justify for most commercial growers. However, on a backyard scale, it could be a fun project, especially with kiddos. So it could give you a little seed, but also a little unsprayed straw, which is a nice bonus. The other nice thing about it is that you can adapt those seeds slowly to your region by growing them, meaning they will do better for you the following year or year after year. So I say give it a shot. You will find out pretty quickly if it's going to work in your context. All right, I hope that was helpful. Up next, we'll take a quick break, and when we return, we're going to talk about what a plant it and forget it farm business would look like. Be right back.
Today's episode is also brought to you by Farmhand. I started a CSA to grow food and build community, not to drown in admin work. Spreadsheets, emails, and pack lists take up too much time. If I could spend less time at my desk and more in the field, that'd be a win. Enter Farmhand. Farmhand automates billing, newsletters, websites, and member support, saving CSA farmers 20 plus hours a week. Focus on farming, not paperwork. See how Farmhand can help. Book a one-on-one demo with founder Ari at farmhand.partners/no-till. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. All right, back to the show.
Okay, so sometimes when I'm taking a break from fantasizing about my citrus farm, I'm fantasizing about a farm that I can just plant and then more or less walk away from and go do something with less of that hard labor in the hot sun vibe. This is especially true when I'm down with dehydration in April. But basically, I daydream sometimes about planting the farm out and then taking, say, July and part of August off while the kids are out of school and the days are painfully, if not dangerously hot. That is hard, of course, because I'm referring to peak growing season. But I know of a few farms who take an entire summer month off, or more or less, of hardcore production, because one, there is a small range of vegetables that really like the intense heat anyway, and two, it's really freaking hot. So the idea I have been scheming on, that I will probably never actually do because it would be difficult to be profitable enough, is more or less a plant it and forget it farm, where I would effectively plant a bunch of stuff and leave for the entire month of July and maybe a week or two of August, and basically not have to do anything with the garden for that month. And then I could come back and harvest what I planted. And in my brain, it would look like this. And if you're watching on YouTube, you can see there's an actual spreadsheet I did for it titled Theoretical Garden Plan to Take July Off, just so I didn't confuse it with actual garden plan. Anyway, it more or less starts in the fall, getting the garlic in. At least here in Kentucky is a crop that's harvested in late June, so that would work. Then onions and potatoes I could harvest by July, by late June generally. Cucumbers is one that I could do early as well and have pretty much done, the whole crop done and harvested and pickled or whatever by July. Same with summer squash and zucchini. So that means that by the last week of June, at least, we could have a bunch of storage crops out, garlic, potatoes, onions, and in storage, and have had cash flow from crops like cukes and squash and zucchini and some early lettuce and those sorts of things for the more reasonable working months. For tomatoes, peppers, watermelon, and sweet corn, those would just be started later than normal with the goal of planting it right before the break. Then for crops like popcorn, ginger, winter squash, dried beans, that sort of stuff, those would just go in the ground at roughly the same time they always do, around mid-May. Tomatoes would be tricky for the trellis and may not be worth it, but maybe planting those right at the break with, with a half-hearted trellising and enough mulch, one could pull it off. So you at least return to semi-manageable plants when you come back. Mulch would be the key here. The entire garden would have to be knee-deep in mulch for this to work, so you don't have to come back to a half acre of mowing to do. And of course, I'd just pay someone to mow around the gardens and around the house. Also, moisture. There is no way to irrigate without stressing about it all day long without the mulch. I mean, you could put it on a timer, but if a line busted, this break could cost you thousands of dollars. So I could see this being practically impossible in a really dry region, but here in Kentucky, where we generally get enough rain, we could probably pull it off. So the idea here is essentially have no crop producing anything that needs to be harvested for the entire month of July, while also having mulch down to help with moisture and weeds. So basically, you just don't have any work. Now, how that would translate to a viable business? Well, I suppose one answer to that is winter farming and early spring farming. What I've described here is obviously a ton of storage stuff that could make an excellent winter CSA or market table in the right market, taking pressure off the growing and production side of the summer while also allowing for a rational break from the grind over the summer. Or it could be sold to winter CSA farmers in bulk, so you don't have to do that work. The lower pressure but lower revenue approach. So basically, once you get back from enjoying the summer with the family, it's get those fall carrots and beets in the ground and start on the lettuce, kale, and spinach that will sustain the winter. And boom, July off, so a farmer could actually enjoy some t-shirt weather somewhere other than under the boiling hot Kentucky sun, like in the woods somewhere, or hiking in a mountain, or at the beach. Enjoy some other slightly cooler, slightly different nature. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed me sharing I'm getting older, so I'm trying to find lazier ways to farm rants. Anyway, let me know your thoughts, your lazy farming methods, anything in that vein. Otherwise, I'm going to wrap it up there for this Monday. But first, a quick shout out for our friends at Rimmel Greenhouses. Whether you're growing tomatoes for market, flowers in the spring, or vegetables for your family, growing in a high tunnel protected from the weather provides the right environment for a harvest you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are strong, durable, and easy to assemble, offering the quality you need to grow productively year-round. The team of experts at Rimmel Greenhouse Systems will be your trusted partners to ensure you get exceptional value from your greenhouse or high tunnel investment. Visit Rimmel.com today to get growing. Don't forget, we are now officially a 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. You can find information about those in the show notes. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you are getting this podcast. That's an easy and awesome way to help us out. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and the team at No-Till Growers. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or the Seed Farmer at no-tillgrowers.com to support our work. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, or you sign up in the month of April, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to author M.K. England. All right, so as you will remember, yesterday, the gang broke into the office of the farmers at the Energy Potato Farm to get a microwave because they wanted to cook one of these potatoes. And Lettuce, in particular, discovered a file called Feeding Schedule 2025-2026. And they learned that these potatoes were going to go to powering a small power plant. They, in fact, didn't need to be cooked, these potatoes. They stored all the energy they needed to run this particular power plant using photosynthesis. And that's when they all looked up at the microwave with the potato baking away and starting to pop and tried to stop it. But before they could, the door blew off the front of the microwave and out wafted a lovely baked potato scent. And, said author M.K. England, anyone got any butter? So anyway, taste test tomorrow on You Say Potato, I Say Potato. No. That's a winner. That's a good one. All right. Thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you tomorrow.